Did you know that the original persona for Joker wasn't arson at all? During early development, the team at Atlas planned for the protagonist's initial persona to be Mephistopheles, the iconic demon from the Faust legend who makes deals for human souls. The designers felt this devilish figure would perfectly embody the theme of rebellion against corrupt authority. But as development progressed and the Phantom Thief concept crystallized, director Katsura Hashino and character designer Shigenori Soejima realized that Arsène Lupin, the gentleman thief from French literature, aligned far more elegantly with the game's core identity. And so Mephistopheles was quietly shelved, and in his place rose Arsène, a decision that would come to define the entire aesthetic of Persona 5. The story of Persona 5's development is one of unexpected obstacles and creative perseverance spanning nearly a decade. Atlas first began preliminary work on the fifth mainline Persona entry during the development of Persona 4, with full production kicking off after the release of Catherine in 2011. That adult-oriented puzzle game served as more than just a side project. Catherine became the testing ground for the custom engine that would eventually power Persona 5, giving the team a chance to experiment with high-definition visuals and more mature storytelling before tackling their flagship franchise. The technology developed for that bizarre love triangle nightmare would form the foundation upon which the Phantom Thieves would eventually stand. When Atlas first announced Persona 5 in November 2013, they optimistically targeted a winter 2014 release window for PlayStation 3. That date would slip not once, not twice, but multiple times over the following years. The reasons for these delays were numerous and often beyond the development team's control. In June 2013, Index Corporation, Atlas's parent company at the time, filed for bankruptcy, throwing the future of the studio into uncertainty. For anxious months, fans and developers alike wondered whether Persona 5 would even see the light of day. Then Sega stepped in, acquiring Atlas and providing the financial stability needed to continue development. But the rescue came with its own complications. The announcement of the PlayStation 4 created a new challenge for the team. Originally planned as a PlayStation 3 exclusive, Persona 5 now needed to span 2 console generations. This meant the two-dimensional art assets, already painstakingly crafted for the previous hardware, required complete redrawing to meet the higher resolution standards of the new system. Director Hashino later revealed in interviews that this cross-generational development was one of the primary factors behind the extended timeline. Every sprite, every menu element, every stylish transition had to be reimagined and rebuilt from the ground up for the more powerful hardware, while still maintaining compatibility with the original target platform. The game finally launched in Japan on September 15, 2016, with Western players waiting until April 4, 2017 to experience it for themselves. Even that Western release date was pushed back from the original February 14th Valentine's Day target, after Atlas USA decided they needed additional time to perfect the localization. The English voice actors actually had to return to the recording studio to re-record certain lines after the script received additional polish. As compensation for this final delay, Atlas included dual audio support as free downloadable content, allowing players to experience the game with either English or Japanese voice acting. Composer Shoji Meguro spent approximately 6 months figuring out the musical direction for Persona 5, before writing a single note of actual composition. He initially considered a brass-heavy jazz style, inspired by Lupin III, the famous anime series about a gentleman thief that clearly influenced the game's overall aesthetic. But after deeper consideration, Meguro landed on acid jazz as the defining genre, drawing inspiration from British band Jamiroquai and Japanese group United Future Organization. The decision to embrace acid jazz over traditional jazz was deliberate. Meguro wanted the music to feel loose, youthful, and somewhat naive, matching the energy of the teenage Phantom Thieves, rather than sophisticated adult criminals. The development of the soundtrack took approximately 3 years from start to finish. Meguro composed around 97 tracks for the game, though only about 70 to 80 of those compositions made it into the final release. Each track underwent multiple iterations to ensure it matched the pacing of in-game events and the emotional beats of the story. For the string arrangements that give songs like Rivers in the Desert their epic quality, Meguro enlisted the Moroya Strings, a 12-piece ensemble led by violinist Koichiro Moroya, layering their live performances with programmed strings to create additional depth and richness. The recording process for Persona 5's music involved meticulous attention to authentic sound production. Rather than relying entirely on synthesized instruments, Meguro prioritized live recordings wherever budget and logistics allowed. The guitar work was performed by session musicians rather than programmed, giving tracks like Last Surprise an organic energy that purely digital production would lack. The bass lines that drive the acid jazz sound were similarly performed by live musicians, their subtle imperfections adding humanity to compositions that could otherwise feel mechanically perfect. Last Surprise required particularly careful design because of how frequently players would hear it. As the standard battle theme, the song needed to remain engaging across hundreds of encounters, spanning dozens of hours. Meguro approached this challenge by creating a track that functions as everyday acid jazz, a song energetic enough to complement combat without becoming exhausting through repetition. The famous opening lyrics about catching enemies off guard created an instant hook that players anticipated rather than dreaded after their 100th battle. The lyrics for Wake Up, Get Out There were written by Benjamin Franklin, not the American founding father, but a frequent Atlas collaborator who has contributed English lyrics to multiple Persona and Shin Megami Tensei projects. Franklin's lyrics capture the game's themes of awakening and rebellion in English that native speakers find natural rather than awkwardly translated. The call to action embedded in the opening theme sets the tone for everything that follows, announcing that passivity is no longer acceptable. Rivers in the Desert serves as the game's climactic battle theme, playing during pivotal boss encounters when the stakes reach their highest. The shift in the laid-back groove of Last Surprise to the dramatic power of Rivers in the Desert signals to players that the current fight matters more than routine encounters. Lin's vocals soar over orchestral arrangements as the song builds toward its triumphant crescendo, creating musical moments that players remember long after completing the game. Beneath the Mask provides the melancholic counterweight to the game's more energetic tracks. Playing during evening hours, as Joker navigates the rain-slicked streets of Tokyo, the song captures the loneliness of being a transfer student falsely accused of crimes, living in an attic above a coffee shop, separated from everyone who might understand his situation. The rain version of the track, with actual rain sounds layered into the mix, became a favorite among fans who discovered the game's music through study playlists and ambient channels. The Persona 5 Royal soundtrack extended Meguro's compositions while adapting to the expanded game's different emotional landscape. The concept for Royal's musical additions was gorgeousness, a brighter, more elaborate sound achieved through additional brass and string arrangements. New tracks like Takeover, which replaced Last Surprise and ambush situations, provided variety for returning players while maintaining the acid jazz foundation. The Royal exclusive boss themes incorporated elements absent from the base game's music, signaling to players that new content had arrived. I Believe serves as the vocal theme for Persona 5 Royal's climactic encounters, its hopeful tone contrasting with the more aggressive energy of the base game's boss themes. The lyrics speak to choosing one's own path despite uncertainty, perfectly capturing the philosophical stakes of the third semester's conflict with Maruki. Lin's performance conveys both determination and vulnerability, acknowledging that rejecting paradise isn't easy, while affirming that authentic struggle matters more than comfortable illusion. The collaboration between Meguro and Lin extended across all Persona 5 releases, creating a musical partnership that defined the series' sound for nearly a decade. Her voice became so associated with the franchise that imagining Persona 5 music with any other vocalist seems wrong to fans who experienced the original release. When Meguro left Atlas in 2021 to pursue independent composition, questions arose about whether the musical identity he established would continue. His freelance work on subsequent projects suggests the partnership may continue in some form. The subtle variations in background music throughout the game reward attentive listening. LeBlanc's theme changes based on story progression, reflecting the evolving atmosphere of Joker's home. School themes differ between regular days and exam periods. Even Mementos features multiple musical variants depending on depth and story progress. These variations keep the soundscape fresh across a 100-hour experience, while providing audio cues about the game's emotional state that players might register only subconsciously. Sound design extended beyond music into the countless audio effects that bring the interface to life. The satisfying snap of menu selections, the dramatic sting when initiating all-out attacks, the subtle ambient sounds of each location all received careful attention. The voice clip of Joker saying persona when summoning his allies in battle was recorded in dozens of variations to prevent repetition from becoming tedious. Even the sound of footsteps changes depending on surface type, grounding the stylized visuals in physical reality. Finding the right vocalist proved to be one of the most crucial decisions in the game's development. Meguro didn't hold traditional auditions, but instead asked around the industry to find a female singer who could perform soul music authentically. A demo tape from a relatively unknown jazz vocalist named Lin Inaizumi caught his attention, her voice perfectly matching the image he had constructed in his mind. At the time, Inaizumi had only one credited professional project to her name, a Japanese television show called Mashiro from 2015. Persona 5 would catapult her into international recognition. Inaizumi's vocal range presented both opportunities and challenges for Meguro. Her natural voice sits in a lower register, similar to a male vocalist, while her falsetto soars dramatically high. This unusual range meant Meguro had to carefully compose each song to bring out the best of her abilities. He learned to maximize the power of her natural voice by keeping the maximum pitch in a range where she could belt with full force. The rapper portion of the opening theme, Wake Up, Get Out There, proved particularly difficult for Inaizumi, who admitted the rapid-fire English lyrics were the most challenging part of her recording sessions. Despite persistent rumors that Meguro discovered Inaizumi performing at a Tokyo jazz club and offered her a job on the spot, both parties have confirmed this romantic origin story is pure fiction. When the tale began circulating on social media in late 2023, Inaizumi herself responded with amusement, joking that while the story wasn't true, it was beautiful enough that maybe they should just let people believe it. Meguro playfully agreed, suggesting he was starting to feel like it really did happen that way. The actual truth, while less cinematic, speaks to the power of Inaizumi's raw talent reaching the right ears at the right moment through nothing more than a well-timed demo recording. The Velvet Room in Persona 5 takes the form of a prison, a dramatic departure from the comfortable elevator of Persona 3 or the luxurious limousine of Persona 4. This design choice was deeply intentional, as the room's appearance reflects the psychological state of its guest. For Joker, a young man falsely accused of assault and placed on probation, the world feels like a cage from which escape seems impossible. But the specific type of prison matters as well. The Velvet Room isn't just any holding facility. It's modeled after a panopticon, the circular prison design conceived by English philosopher Jeremy Bentham in the late 18th century. The panopticon represents a particular philosophy of surveillance and control. Its circular structure places prisoner cells along the outer walls, while a central watchtower rises in the middle. Guards in the tower can observe any cell at any time, but prisoners can never be certain whether they're being watched at any given moment. This uncertainty encourages constant self-regulation, as inmates behave as though they're always under observation. For a game about rebellion against societal control and the weight of false accusations, the panopticon provides a powerful visual metaphor that extends throughout the entire experience. The twin wardens, Caroline and Justine, represent something unprecedented in the Persona series. Previous Velvet Room attendants like Elizabeth, Theodore, and Margaret appeared as elegant servants offering guidance with gentle manners. Caroline and Justine instead treat the protagonist with open hostility, referring to him as inmate and physically kicking him back into his cell. Their harsh demeanor serves the prison aesthetic, while also foreshadowing the major revelation that the Igor players interact with throughout most of the game is actually an imposter. The true Igor was attacked and imprisoned by Yaldabaoth, the god of control, who took his form and manipulated the Phantom Thieves as part of a grand game. Lavenza, the true attendant of the Velvet Room, was split into Caroline and Justine by the false god's power. The twins' names reference Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, continuing a tradition established by previous attendants Elizabeth and Margaret, all named after characters from that classic novel about creation and identity. Even their positioning reflects their divided nature. Caroline stands on the left, wielding an electric prod and an aggressive personality, while Justine remains on the right with a clipboard and more thoughtful demeanor. The change in Igor's voice between Persona 4 and Persona 5 carries a bittersweet story behind it. Isamu Tanonaka, the Japanese voice actor who originated the role of Igor in the very first Persona game, passed away in January 2010. His distinctive croaking voice had defined the character for over a decade, making Igor instantly recognizable to series fans. Atlas faced the delicate challenge of continuing the character without one of its most iconic performers. For Persona 5, Atlas cast Masane Tsukuyama as the new voice of Igor, though players wouldn't realize the significance of this change until late in the game. Tsukuyama delivers a noticeably different Igor, deeper and more measured than Tanonaka's quirky croaking. What initially seemed like an unfortunate necessity of recasting transformed into brilliant narrative misdirection. The Igor players interact with throughout most of Persona 5 sounds different because he is different. Yaldabaoth's impersonation lacks the authentic peculiarity of the true Igor, and the voice change that players might attribute to real-world casting circumstances actually serves as subtle foreshadowing within the story itself. The English voice for Igor was provided by Kirk Thornton, who maintains the enigmatic quality expected of the Velvet Room's master. When the true Igor finally appears near the game's conclusion, players who notice the vocal differences throughout their journey experience the revelation differently than those who accepted the new voice without question. This metatextual layer adds depth for longtime series fans who remembered Tanonaka's original performance while remaining invisible to newcomers experiencing their first Persona game. The localization of Persona 5 presented enormous challenges for Atlus USA, the American subsidiary responsible for bringing Japanese games to Western audiences. The script contains hundreds of thousands of words across main story dialogue, confidant conversations, environmental details, enemy names, item descriptions, and countless other text elements. Every line needed translation that preserved meaning while adapting cultural references for audiences who might not share the Japanese context. Honorifics, wordplay, and culture-specific jokes required creative solutions that maintained entertainment value without losing essential character. Certain characters presented particular localization challenges. Ryuji's rough speech patterns needed to feel authentically delinquent in English, without making him seem unintelligent. Haru's extremely polite Japanese, using formal speech patterns that indicate high social status, required English equivalents that conveyed similar class implications. Yusuke's artistic and sometimes archaic vocabulary demanded careful word choices that sounded appropriately eccentric without becoming incomprehensible. Each character's voice needed to remain consistent across tens of thousands of lines, while feeling natural in a language structured very differently from the original Japanese. The localization team made deliberate choices to preserve certain Japanese elements, rather than completely westernizing the experience. Honorifics like senpai for upperclassmen and sensei for teachers remain in the English script, maintaining the hierarchical social structures essential to understanding character relationships. Japanese school terminology, monetary values in yen, and cultural events like school festivals and exam periods appear without extensive explanation, trusting players to either already understand or learn through context. This approach preserves the distinctly Japanese setting that gives Persona 5 much of its unique atmosphere. Names presented another localization consideration. Japanese names are traditionally given family name first, followed by personal name. The English localization reversed this order to match Western conventions. So Kurusu Akira in Japanese materials becomes Akira Kurusu in English. But the protagonist's default name varies across media, with the manga using Akira Kurusu, while the anime adopted Ren Amamiya, a name that became canonical after appearing in subsequent spin-offs and crossovers. This name confusion reflects the silent protagonist tradition, where players are encouraged to name the main character themselves, making any official name feel somewhat arbitrary. The dual audio option, offered as free downloadable content after fan requests, allowed players to experience the original Japanese performances with English subtitles. This edition acknowledged that many Western fans prefer Japanese voice acting, whether for authenticity, appreciation of the original performers, or simply personal taste. Including both options required additional work and storage space, but significantly expanded accessibility for different player preferences. The decision set a precedent that later Atlus releases continued, recognizing their international audience's diverse preferences. Character designer Shigenori Sojima approached Joker's appearance with the concept of a Black Panther in mind. This choice deliberately contrasted with the protagonist of Persona 4, Yu Narukami, who was designed around the image of a loyal, sincere dog. Where Yu projected reliability and straightforwardness, Joker needed to embody mystery, danger, and duality. A person who appears unassuming by day, but transforms into something sleek and predatory by night. The Black Panther metaphor influenced everything from Joker's sharp features to his flowing coattails that move like living shadows. The signature coattails of Joker's Phantom Thief outfit deserve special attention. Sojima designed them to flutter dramatically with their own sense of movement, creating the impression that Joker himself might take flight at any moment. According to interviews, the female staff at Atlas provided important input on one particular design element: the gloves. They insisted that men wearing gloves were inherently cool, leading Sojima to incorporate the long black leather gloves that became such an iconic part of Joker's silhouette. The all-out attack finishing illustration even showcases Joker adjusting his gloves with confident flair. Creating the protagonist required multiple design iterations before the team settled on the final look. Early concept art showed versions of Joker with much longer, more unkempt hair that gave him an overtly rebellious appearance. Another concept featured shorter, neater hair that made him look almost completely unassuming. The final design strikes a careful balance, with his messy black hair and oversized glasses allowing him to blend into crowds while hinting at the wildness lurking beneath the surface. The original Phantom Thief visual style actually drew from shonen manga aesthetics, but these designs clashed with the series' more realistic sensibilities and were eventually scrapped. The P-Studio team responsible for Persona 5's development operated with a relatively small core group, considering the game's eventual scope. Director Katsura Hashino led the team through the entire 8-year development cycle, maintaining creative vision despite the challenges that repeatedly threatened to derail the project. His leadership style emphasized quality over schedule, repeatedly pushing back release dates when the team felt the game wasn't ready. This commitment to polish contributed to the final product's exceptional refinement, but also placed significant pressure on team members working extended hours. Hashino's decision to leave P-Studio after Persona 5's completion to establish Studio Zero marked the end of an era for the franchise. He had directed the modern Persona titles since Persona 3, establishing the visual novel and social simulation hybrid format that defined the series' identity. His departure meant that Persona 6 would be the first mainline entry developed entirely without his direct involvement, though P-Studio retained many of the team members who had implemented his vision over the preceding decades. The transition of key personnel reflects the challenge of maintaining creative identity across leadership changes. When Hashino left, questions arose about whether Persona could retain its distinctive feel without the director who had shaped it. The success of subsequent spin-offs developed by P-Studio without Hashino's direct involvement suggested the studio's institutional knowledge could sustain quality even as individuals moved on. However, the mainline entries carry different weight than spin-offs, and Persona 6's development will ultimately determine whether the franchise's identity survived the transition. Sojima's character design process involves extensive research and iteration before finalizing any character. For each Phantom Thief, he studied real-world fashion, historical costume design, and the visual language of the character's personality type before putting pen to paper. Makoto's biker aesthetic required research into motorcycle culture and protective gear. Haru's elegant appearance drew from high-fashion references appropriate for a corporate heiress. Even minor characters received careful consideration, as Sojima believes that every person visible in the game world should feel like someone with their own story. The attention to fashion extends throughout the game's visual design. Characters change clothes for different activities, wearing school uniforms during the day, casual outfits on weekends, and specialized gear during palace infiltrations. The seasonal shifts in the game's calendar bring corresponding wardrobe changes, as summer uniforms give way to winter layers. These details might seem trivial individually, but collectively create a world where characters feel like real people with real closets, rather than video game avatars who wear the same outfit for an entire year. The collaboration between art and music departments ensured visual and audio elements reinforced each other. Meguro received early character designs and environmental concepts to help him compose music that matched the visual tone Sojima established. Conversely, Sojima sometimes adjusted color choices after hearing preliminary music tracks, ensuring the overall aesthetic remained cohesive. This cross-departmental collaboration required additional coordination time, but resulted in a product where every element supports every other element. The quality assurance process for a game of Persona 5's complexity required extensive testing across multiple configurations. The cross-generational development for both PlayStation 3 and PlayStation 4 meant every feature needed verification on 2 different hardware platforms. The branching narrative paths created by the confidant system meant testers needed to verify countless combinations of relationship levels and dialogue choices. The localization process added another layer of testing, as English text needed verification for proper display in menus designed for Japanese characters. Voice recording sessions for the English cast spanned multiple years as the localization proceeded in parallel with ongoing development. Actors initially recorded dialogue based on scripts that sometimes changed before final release, requiring return sessions to re-record altered lines. The emotional intensity of certain scenes demanded multiple takes, as directors worked with performers to capture the exact tone each moment required. The final deadline pressure meant some later recordings happened under tighter time constraints than earlier sessions, though the cast and directors maintained quality standards throughout. Morgana went through substantial design changes before becoming the round, blue-eyed cat players know. Early concept art depicts a taller, more curvy feline, with red spiral eyes reminiscent of Mementos itself. Some early designs even suggested Morgana might have been female at one point, given the typically feminine name and certain proportions in the concept work. Sojima follows a personal rule when designing mascot characters. Their color palette should consist of the toy colors, red, yellow, and blue. This same principle guided the designs of Aegis in Persona 3 and Teddy in Persona 4, giving the series mascots a consistent visual identity, despite their vastly different forms. Goro Akechi's design underwent numerous revisions as well. One early concept showed him with much shorter hair, giving him a more innocent appearance that would have significantly changed how players perceived him during his friendly detective phase. Another version depicted him without his characteristic bangs covering his forehead. His persona Robin Hood originally looked more like an outlaw than the heroic archer of the final game, with earlier designs showing a figure carrying a gun and rapier instead of the massive bow. The evolution toward a more traditionally heroic appearance for Robin Hood actually serves the narrative, presenting a facade that masks the darker truth beneath. Every Phantom Thieves persona draws from the rich tradition of literary and historical rebels, thieves, and outlaws. Ryuji Sakamoto awakens to Captain Kidd, named after the Scottish pirate William Kidd, who lived during the 17th century. The historical Captain Kidd presents an interesting parallel to Ryuji's own situation. Kidd was actually a privateer, a government-sanctioned sailor, who was later accused and convicted of piracy, despite questionable evidence. He was executed for crimes many historians believe he never actually committed. This wrongful condemnation mirrors how Ryuji was unfairly cast out from the track team and labeled a delinquent for standing up against Kamoshida's abuse. Anne Takamaki's Persona Carmen comes from the famous 1875 opera by Georges Bizet, itself based on a novella by Prosper Mérimée. Carmen represents the archetypal femme fatale, a passionate, free-spirited woman who uses her charm and beauty to navigate a world that constantly tries to control her. The visual design of Carmen in Persona 5 literally shows her standing on men whose heads are trapped in heart-shaped boxes, representing how she bends masculine desire to her will. This connects to Anne's own journey of reclaiming her power after Kamoshida attempted to exploit her appearance for his own gratification. Yusuke Kitagawa's Goemon takes its name from Ishikawa Goemon, a legendary Japanese outlaw from the 16th century who supposedly stole from the wealthy to give to the poor, earning him comparisons to Robin Hood in Western contexts. The historical Goemon was captured and executed by being boiled alive in a giant iron cauldron along with his young son, a fate so dramatic it inspired countless kabuki plays and artistic depictions. The persona's ornate oriental styling and kabuki-inspired face paint pay homage to this theatrical tradition, while the long pipe references traditional Japanese nobility and artistic culture. Makoto Nijima awakens to Johanna, named after Pope Joan, a legendary female figure who supposedly disguised herself as a man and rose through the Catholic Church's hierarchy to become pope during the Middle Ages. She allegedly reigned for several years before her true gender was discovered. This story of a woman succeeding in a male-dominated institution through deception and determination parallels Makoto's own struggle to prove herself in environments controlled by authority figures who underestimate or ignore her. The motorcycle form of Johanna represents forward momentum and escape from constraints, fitting for a character who must learn to stop following others' expectations. Futaba Sakura's Necronomicon stands unique among the Phantom Thieves personas because it takes its name not from a person, but from an object. The Necronomicon is a fictional grimoire invented by horror author H.P. Lovecraft, a book of forbidden knowledge that drives readers to madness. This reflects Futaba's role as the team's navigator and information specialist, accessing knowledge that others cannot reach. Her withdrawn, hikikomori lifestyle and extensive knowledge of obscure topics from spending years online also connects to the idea of forbidden or dangerous knowledge affecting the mind. Haru Okamura's Milady derives from Milady de Winter, the cunning French spy and antagonist from Alexander Dumas' The Three Musketeers. Milady uses her beauty, wit, and ruthlessness to manipulate those around her, hiding a sharp intelligence behind a gentle facade. This connects to Haru's own arc of maintaining a pleasant exterior while struggling with darker feelings about her father's business practices and her arranged marriage. The elegant yet deadly aesthetic of Milady, with her elaborate dress concealing weapons, represents the duality Haru must embrace as she finds her own voice. Goro Akechi possesses not one but two personas, a reflection of his fractured psyche and the lies he tells himself and others. Robin Hood, the heroic outlaw who steals from the rich to give to the poor, represents the persona Akechi presents to the world. As the beloved detective prince, he projects an image of righteous justice, someone fighting for the common people against corruption. The green and gold aesthetic of Robin Hood, with its majestic bow and noble bearing, embodies everything Akechi wants the public to believe about him. This persona awakened when Akechi first entered the metaverse, responding to his genuine desire to be seen as a hero. But Robin Hood is only half the story. Loki, the Norse god of mischief and deception, represents Akechi's true nature, the bitter, vengeful soul hidden behind the charming smile. In Norse mythology, Loki is a trickster who ultimately betrays the gods and brings about Ragnarok, the end of all things. Akechi's Loki shares this apocalyptic energy, a being of chaos and destruction that revels in the suffering of others. The black and red design contrasts sharply with Robin Hood's noble appearance, revealing the hatred that Akechi harbors toward the father who abandoned him and the society that judged him for circumstances beyond his control. The duality of Akechi's personas reflects the concept of the wild card taken to a dark extreme. Where Joker's ability to hold multiple personas represents his genuine connections with others and his flexible approach to identity, Akechi's dual personas represent psychological fragmentation. He cannot integrate his hero complex with his desire for revenge, so they exist as separate entities, each emerging in different contexts. When operating as the detective prince, Robin Hood appears. When fulfilling his role as the conspiracy's assassin, Loki takes over. This psychological split ultimately proves his undoing, as he can never fully commit to either identity. Persona 5 Royal introduced Sumire Yoshizawa, initially presenting herself as Kasumi, whose persona Cendrillon takes its name from the French version of Cinderella. The fairy tale connection proves deeply appropriate once her true story unfolds. Cendrillon's design incorporates elegant ballroom aesthetics with rapier-like precision, representing a transformation from downtrodden circumstances to magical possibility. The glass slipper motif appears throughout the persona's visual design, connecting to themes of hidden identity and the fragility of constructed personas. The choice of Cendrillon rather than the more familiar Cinderella reflects the game's consistent use of French naming conventions for literary references. Sumire's journey parallels the Cinderella narrative, but subverts expectations in crucial ways. Rather than waiting for a fairy godmother to rescue her, she must ultimately reject the comfortable illusion created by Dr. Maruki and embrace the painful truth of her own identity. Her evolution from Cendrillon to Ella in the game's climax represents casting off the fantasy and accepting reality, even when reality hurts. The Metaverse Navigator app that allows the Phantom Thieves to enter palaces was designed by Yaldabouth as part of his grand experiment, pitting the desire for freedom against the desire for control. This means the tool the protagonists use throughout their rebellion was actually created by their ultimate enemy. Yaldabouth gave the app to both Joker and Goro Akechi, setting them up as opposing pieces in his game. The phone-based interface reflects the pervasive nature of technology in modern life, how devices that promise connection and freedom can also become instruments of surveillance and manipulation. The calling card mechanic represents one of Persona 5's most elegant integrations of narrative and gameplay. Before stealing a treasure, the Phantom Thieves must send a calling card to their target, formally announcing their intention to take what the target values most. In gameplay terms, this causes the treasure to materialize into a form that can actually be stolen. Narratively, the calling card serves as a declaration of war, forcing the target to acknowledge the Phantom Thieves' existence and confront the possibility that their distorted desires might be exposed. The psychological weight of receiving such a message causes the target's shadow to solidify the treasure, protecting it through manifestation rather than leaving it formless and vulnerable. Each calling card features the Phantom Thieves' distinctive logo, a top hat and mask combination designed by Yusuke that became iconic far beyond the game itself. The logo's simplicity allows it to work at any scale, from small stickers to massive projections, while its combination of elegance and menace perfectly captures the team's aesthetic. When the Phantom Thieves decide to send a card, Yusuke takes charge of the artistic elements, while Ryuji handles distribution, leading to some cards being more eloquently designed than others depending on who takes primary responsibility. Safe rooms scattered throughout each palace provide crucial respite from the dangers of cognitive exploration. These spaces exist because even the most distorted heart contains moments of relative peace, areas where the palace ruler's cognition relaxes enough to create stable ground. The design of safe rooms varies by palace, reflecting how each target thinks of safety differently. Kamoshida's castle features trophy rooms where he keeps symbols of his victories. Madarame's museum has storage areas for artwork he considers secondary. Kaneshira's bank contains employee break rooms where workers briefly escape his obsessive gaze. The mechanical importance of safe rooms cannot be overstated. They allow players to save their progress, heal a party, and fast travel to previously discovered locations within the palace. More importantly, they provide strategic checkpoints that make the often lengthy palace infiltrations manageable across multiple play sessions. The game's calendar system means players must balance dungeon exploration with social activities, and safe rooms allow them to make meaningful progress without committing to completing an entire palace in one sitting. This design respects players' time while maintaining the tension of resource management that makes dungeon crawling compelling. The concept of cognition underlying the metaverse extends far beyond simple perception. What people believe becomes real within the cognitive world, which explains why the Phantom Thieves can perform superhuman feats inside palaces, while remaining ordinary teenagers in the real world. If enough people believe Joker can summon personas and fight shadows, then within the collective unconscious, he absolutely can. This also explains why public perception of the Phantom Thieves directly affects their power. When people believe in them, they grow stronger. When public opinion turns against them, their abilities diminish. The Seven Deadly Sins framework, structuring the palaces, provides moral clarity to what could otherwise feel like vigilante violence. By associating each target with a specific cardinal sin, the game establishes clear wrongdoing that justifies intervention. Kamoshida's lust manifests not just as sexual desire, but as possessive consumption of anything he wants. Madarame's vanity extends beyond pride in appearance to encompass his entire self-image as a great artist, regardless of whose work he steals. Kaneshira's gluttony drives him to consume the futures of young people through predatory lending schemes that trap them in cycles of debt. Futaba's palace initially appears to be about sloth, as her hikikomori lifestyle seems to embody laziness and withdrawal from society. But the sin actually represented by her pyramid is wrath, specifically the rage she directs inward at herself for surviving when her mother died. The coffin at the palace's depths contains her self-destructive beliefs about her own worthlessness. Unlike other palace rulers who project their distortions outward onto others, Futaba's distorted cognition attacks her own psyche, making her palace unique as one where the Phantom Thieves help rather than oppose the ruler's shadow. Okumura's palace represents greed through its space station aesthetic, depicting workers as literal robots, produced and discarded based on profitability. The corporate exploitation theme hits particularly hard for Japanese audiences familiar with the exhausting work culture that has led to karoshi, death by overwork, becoming a recognized phenomenon. The robotic employees aren't just metaphor, but represent how Okumura genuinely views his workers, as interchangeable parts in a machine designed solely to generate revenue. His daughter Haru represents another asset to be traded through advantageous marriage, rather than a person with her own desires. Sai Nijima's casino palace represents envy, though this might seem surprising given her professional success. Her distortion stems from constantly comparing herself to others, and feeling that the system is rigged against her. As a prosecutor, in a society that often undervalues women in professional roles, Sai has internalized the belief that she must win at all costs, because losing means admitting the game was never fair. Her palace transforms trials into gambling because she has come to see justice itself as random chance, rather than principled pursuit of truth. Masayoshi Shido's cruise ship embodies pride, specifically the hubris of a man who believes he alone can steer Japan through troubled waters. The ship sinking into an ocean of cognitive humanity represents how Shido views everyone else as drowning masses, requiring his leadership to survive. His followers appear as golden statues throughout the ship, literally worshipping at the altar of his ambition. The repeated transformations his shadow undergoes during the boss battle reflect the many faces Shido presents to different audiences, adapting his persona to whatever will gain him more power. The depths of mementos reveal the final sin represented in the game: sloth. Not the lazy sloth of refusing to act, but the spiritual sloth of refusing to take responsibility for one's own life. The general public's desire to surrender agency to authority figures has created a prison where everyone willingly wears chains. The Holy Grail grants wishes by removing the burden of choice, offering security in exchange for freedom. This collective cognitive palace explains why individual changes of heart rarely ripple outward into broader social transformation, as the public's desire for comfortable captivity constantly regenerates the conditions that enable corruption. Each palace in Persona 5 represents one of the 7 deadly sins, though the game presents these sins in unexpected ways. Kamoshida's castle embodies lust through his predatory behavior toward female students. Madarame's museum represents vanity, specifically the excessive pride in achievements that aren't truly one's own. Kanashiro's bank manifests gluttony, though not in the traditional sense of overeating. Instead, it shows an insatiable hunger for money and power that can never be satisfied, regardless of how much wealth accumulates. The floating bank above Shibuya literally drains resources from the city below. Futaba's pyramid initially appears to represent sloth, given her withdrawn lifestyle and refusal to engage with the outside world. But the palace actually embodies wrath, specifically the rage Futaba directs at herself over her mother's death. The hostile sphinx that guards the treasure isn't an external threat, but a manifestation of Futaba's own self-hatred, the part of her that believes she deserves punishment. This subversion of expectations reflects how the 7 sins can manifest in unexpected forms, how wrath can appear as withdrawal and self-destruction rather than outward violence. Okumura's spaceport presents greed through corporate exploitation, depicting employees as literal robots disposable the moment they stop being useful. Sai Nijima's casino represents envy, her desperate desire to achieve the recognition and success she sees others receiving, driving her toward increasingly compromised ethics. Shido's cruise ship embodies pride in its most dangerous form, the absolute conviction that one deserves power over others simply by virtue of existing. The prison of regression in Mementos represents sloth on a societal scale, the collective desire to stop thinking and simply be told what to do. The concept of cognitive existence allows the game to explore how our perceptions shape reality in profound ways. Within a palace, people appear as the ruler perceives them. Anne becomes a sexual object in Kamoshida's twisted mind, depicted as a princess in revealing clothing. Yusuke appears as a portrait alongside other students Madarame has exploited, reduced to nothing more than a source of artwork to steal. These cognitive copies can be destroyed without affecting their real-world counterparts, but they reveal uncomfortable truths about how we objectify and categorize the people around us. Morgana himself represents a special type of cognitive existence. Created by Igor from the remnants of human hope as a last resort against Yaldabaoth's control, Morgana exists somewhere between a true Velvet Room attendant and a cognitive being. His feline form comes from humanity's widespread association between cats and mystery, while his ability to transform into a bus directly references the cat bus from Studio Ghibli's My Neighbor Totoro. When first demonstrating this ability, Morgana specifically notes that cats turning into buses is an extremely widespread cognition among the general public, a knowing wink to audiences familiar with the beloved animated film. The Phantom Thieves' method of changing hearts through stealing treasures carries interesting ethical implications that the game explicitly addresses. Unlike simply defeating an enemy, Stealing a treasure forces the target to confront the distortion in their own heart. The treasure itself represents the point where the ruler's desires became twisted, the moment where ambition became corruption, or protection became control. When Kamoshida's treasure manifests in the real world as his Olympic medal, we understand that his athletic glory became the foundation for his abuse of power at Shujin Academy. Calling cards serve a crucial function beyond mere dramatic flair. By announcing their intentions to the target, the Phantom Thieves force that person's treasure to materialize within their palace. Without the calling card, the treasure remains abstract and intangible, impossible to steal. This mechanic represents the psychological truth that confronting our shadow selves requires acknowledgement that something is wrong. Until Kamoshida receives the calling card, he can continue believing his behavior is justified. The card forces him to recognize, even if only unconsciously, that his desires have become distorted. The relationship between Persona 5 and the broader Shin Megami Tensei franchise deserves attention. The Persona series began as a spin-off of Megami Tensei, designed to take the interesting core elements of that franchise and make them more approachable for mainstream audiences. Where Shin Megami Tensei games often focus on apocalyptic scenarios and complex alignment systems, Persona emphasizes personal relationships and coming-of-age narratives. Director Hashino noted that after Persona 2, the series had reached a standstill, requiring a fundamental reimagining that resulted in Persona 3's revolutionary social link system. The demon designs in Persona 5 draw from the extensive Megami Tensei compendium, developed over decades by legendary artist Kazuma Kaneko. Kaneko established the visual language for creatures like Jack Frost, Pyrojack, and countless others that appear throughout both franchises. Sojima inherited the role of character designer for the modern Persona trilogy, developing his own style while remaining respectful of Kaneko's legacy. He once described approaching character design with the goal of pleasing Persona fans, rather than trying to replicate Kaneko's work, eventually settling into a style that feels both fresh and connected to series history. The infamous demon Mara appears in Persona 5, just as it has in every Megami Tensei game since the original, as a giant green phallus riding a golden chariot. This intentionally provocative design references Mara from Buddhist mythology, the demon who tempted Siddhartha Gautama during his meditation under the Bodhi tree. The original Mara represented desire and temptation, attempting to distract the future Buddha from achieving enlightenment. Atlus's interpretation takes this concept to its most literal extreme, creating one of gaming's most notorious recurring jokes that has somehow persisted across decades and numerous international releases. Igor's distinctive appearance and mannerism have remained consistent since the first Persona game in 1996. His long nose, hunched posture, and bulging eyes intentionally evoke a sense of unsettling otherworldliness. The voice actor who originally portrayed Igor in Japanese, Isamu Tananaka, passed away in 2010, creating a challenge for subsequent games. Persona 4 Arena worked around this by using archived audio, but Persona 5 needed extensive new dialogue. The decision to make the Igor players interact with throughout most of the game an imposter allowed the development team to use a different voice actor while maintaining narrative consistency. The English localization of Persona 5 represented one of Atlus USA's most ambitious undertakings. The sheer volume of text, estimated at over 2 million Japanese characters, required months of translation and adaptation. Unlike some Japanese games that receive more liberal localizations, Atlus typically aims for accuracy, while still ensuring natural English dialogue. Project lead Yu Namba supervised the recording with a focus on matching the quality and care that defined previous Persona localizations. The decision to delay the Western release from February to April 2017 specifically allowed for additional script revisions and re-recording sessions. Xander Mobus voices the protagonist in the English version, bringing Joker to life through battle cries, menu confirmations, and occasional dialogue moments. Before Persona 5, Mobus was best known as the announcer for Super Smash Bros. For Nintendo 3DS and Wii U, a role he continued in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. The casting created an amusing recursion when Joker was later added to Ultimate as downloadable content, meaning Mobus both announces fighters and voices one of them. His relatively minimal dialogue as Joker reflects the silent protagonist tradition, but the moments where Joker does speak carry significant weight. Max Mittelman brings explosive energy to Ryuji Sakamoto, channeling the character's impulsive enthusiasm and frequent outbursts. Cassandra Lee Morris provides Morgana's voice, delivering both the imperious demands that characters go to sleep and the more vulnerable moments that reveal the cat's insecurities. Morris has extensive experience in anime voice acting, having performed in the original Japanese dub of numerous properties, giving her an understanding of how Japanese vocal performances translate to English audiences. Her vocal range allows Morgana to shift from pompous declarations to genuine emotional vulnerability. Matthew Mercer, renowned for his work as a voice actor and host of Critical Role, brings elegance and passion to Yusuke Kitagawa. Mercer's extensive gaming credits include major roles across multiple franchises, but his portrayal of the eccentric artist demonstrates remarkable range. Cherami Lee voices Makoto Nijima with controlled intensity that softens as the character opens up throughout the story. Erika Lindbeck captures Futaba Sakura's anxiety and eventual growth with a performance that balances comedic timing with genuine emotional depth. The complete English cast received praise for maintaining consistency across multiple spin-off titles. The original Japanese voice cast includes Jun Fukuyama as a protagonist, who also voices Arsene himself, creating a symbolic connection between Joker and his initial persona. Fukuyama is one of Japan's most prolific voice actors, known for roles across countless anime series and games. Ikue Otani, the voice of Pikachu in the Pokémon franchise, provides Morgana's Japanese voice, which inspired an Easter egg where one dialogue option allows Joker to say, "Morgana, I choose you," during the Kaneshiro investigation. This reference works in both languages because Otani's connection to Pokémon is well known internationally. Persona 5's visual presentation pushed the stylistic boundaries of the medium in ways that influenced countless games that followed. The menus themselves became a statement, rejecting the static interfaces of most role-playing games in favor of dynamic, constantly moving elements. Every transition features Joker in some form, whether sliding across the screen, adjusting his glasses, or dramatically ripping away masks. The primary color red permeates everything, chosen by Sojima to convey a harsh, dangerous feeling that contrasted with the blue of Persona 3 and the yellow of Persona 4. The decision to use red carried specific symbolic weight. Blue represented Persona 3's themes of death and urban melancholy, while yellow evoked both the rural sunshine of Persona 4's countryside setting and the warning signal appropriate for its murder mystery plot. Red for Persona 5 suggested danger, passion, and revolution, the color of blood and fire associated with upheaval throughout human history. Even the UI elements incorporate red as an accent color, creating a cohesive visual identity that extends from battle screens to calendar transitions to the simple act of saving your game. Battles in Persona 5 introduced the hold-up mechanic that allowed players to negotiate with demons rather than immediately destroying them. This feature actually returned from earlier Shin Megami Tensei games, having been absent from Persona 3 and 4. The negotiations require players to respond appropriately to demon requests, based on their personality types, with some demons preferring flattery, while others respond better to aggression or humor. Successfully negotiating can yield new personas, items, or money, adding strategic depth beyond simply exploiting elemental weaknesses. The baton pass mechanic introduced in Persona 5 revolutionized how players approached combat flow. When a character exploits an enemy weakness and earns a one more turn, they can pass that turn to another party member instead of acting again themselves. The receiving character gains boosted attack power for their action, creating chains of escalating damage when executed properly. Maxing out confidant relationships with party members increases the baton pass boost, providing tangible combat rewards for investing time in social bonds outside of dungeons. Technical damage added another layer to combat strategy. When enemies suffer from status ailments like burn, freeze, or shock, attacks that exploit those conditions deal technical damage regardless of elemental matchups. This creates additional paths to downing enemies beyond simply matching elements to weaknesses. A frozen enemy takes technical damage from physical attacks, while a sleeping enemy becomes vulnerable to almost everything. Status ailments that might otherwise feel like minor nuisances become strategic resources when technical damage enters the equation. The Showtime attacks, added in Persona 5 Royal, paired characters together for devastating cooperative assaults. These flashy team-up moves trigger randomly when certain conditions are met, featuring fully animated sequences that showcase each pairing's unique dynamic. Joker and Akechi's Showtime depicts their complicated rivalry through synchronized gunplay. Ryuji and Yusuke's attack highlights their unlikely friendship despite contrasting personalities. Anne and Morgana's sequence plays on the cat's obvious crush through a Hollywood-style routine. These attacks deal massive damage while providing character development through action. The social simulation half of Persona 5 demands careful time management across an in-game calendar spanning nearly a full year. Each day divides into multiple time slots: morning, lunchtime, after school, and evening. Most activities consume one time slot, forcing players to constantly prioritize between spending time with confidants, working part-time jobs, studying for exams, exploring dungeons, or improving social stats. Rainy days provide different opportunities than sunny ones. Some confidants only appear on specific days of the week. The constant pressure of limited time creates meaningful choices that define each player's unique playthrough. 5 social stats govern what activities and dialogue options become available: knowledge, guts, charm, proficiency, and kindness. Each stat has 5 ranks, from the lowest level to the maximum, with evocative names tracking progression. Guts, for example, progresses from milquetoast through bold to lion-hearted. Certain confidants require specific stat levels before they'll even begin spending time with the protagonist. Takemi won't trust someone without sufficient guts to handle her experimental treatments. Hifumi Togo only engages with opponents who demonstrate adequate knowledge of strategy. Raising social stats requires dedicating precious time slots to activities that provide incremental improvements. Reading books on the subway improves knowledge while traveling. Working at the beef bowl shop builds both proficiency through food preparation and money for equipment purchases. Studying at the diner during rainy nights provides bonus knowledge gains. Taking baths at the public bathhouse on Monday and Thursday increases charm. Every activity in the game serves multiple purposes, rewarding players who learn to maximize efficiency across systems. The classroom provides regular opportunities to improve knowledge while also testing it. Teachers randomly call on students to answer questions, with correct responses boosting social stats and earning admiration from classmates. The questions range from straightforward academic trivia to obscure cultural references that might require research outside the game. Exam periods punctuate each semester, with test scores reflecting accumulated knowledge stat levels and correct answers to multiple choice questions. High scores earn rewards and increase charm as word spreads about the transfer students' academic prowess. Part-time jobs serve multiple functions beyond earning money. The convenience store job is available immediately and provides flexible scheduling for players who need cash early. The beef bowl shop unlocks proficiency gains through memorizing orders. The flower shop builds kindness through helping customers select appropriate arrangements. The crossword puzzle job at the newspaper stand rewards knowledge for solving puzzles. Even working these mundane jobs, Joker builds the skills and resources needed to lead the Phantom Thieves effectively. The confidant system extends far beyond the party members to encompass characters throughout Tokyo. A disgraced politician seeking redemption, a back-alley doctor conducting questionable research, a fortune teller struggling with the ethics of her predictions, a video game prodigy facing adult challenges, a reporter chasing stories that threaten powerful people. Each represents a person bound by circumstances who the protagonist helps through conversation and companionship, building bonds that translate into tangible gameplay benefits while telling compelling personal stories. Sojiro Sakura, the protagonist's guardian, exemplifies how confidant storylines weave into the main narrative. As the Hierophant Arcana, Sojiro represents tradition and established wisdom, initially appearing as an obstacle to the protagonist's freedom. He imposes strict rules, warns against causing trouble, and seems dismissive of the transfer student forced upon him by circumstances. But as their relationship develops, players discover the painful history behind Sojiro's guardedness, his connection to Futaba and her mother, and his genuine care hidden beneath gruff exterior. By rank 10, Sojiro has become a father figure willing to trust and support Joker completely. Tai Takemi's Death Arcana Confidant explores themes of transformation and the courage to continue after devastating setbacks. A brilliant doctor whose career was destroyed when a patient died during an experimental treatment, Takemi now operates a back-alley clinic selling questionable medications. Her story reveals that the death was actually caused by pharmaceutical company interference, and helping her reclaim her reputation requires gathering evidence while serving as a guinea pig for her latest experimental treatments. The death card traditionally signifies endings that enable new beginnings, perfectly describing Takemi's arc from disgraced exile to vindicated physician. Chihaya Mifune represents the fortune arcana, appropriately for a fortune teller grappling with whether her predictions actually help people. Her abilities are genuine, but were exploited by a cult that used her readings to manipulate vulnerable believers. The confidant follows her breaking free from their control, while questioning whether knowing the future brings happiness or merely different forms of suffering. Her services provide useful gameplay benefits, including the ability to boost confidant relationships or preview story outcomes, while her story raises questions about fate, agency, and the ethics of wielding information about others' futures. Toranosuke Yoshida, the failed politician relegated to soapbox speeches that passers-by ignore, carries the Sun Arcana representing optimism and warmth. His backstory involves disgrace from taking responsibility for a scandal he didn't cause, destroying a promising career before it properly began. Helping him regain his voice and eventually return to politics provides Joker with public speaking skills that improve negotiation abilities. The Sun's traditional meaning of success and positivity inverts initially, as Yoshida seems like a portrait of failure, but his eventual redemption validates the card's promise. Hifumi Togo, the Star Arcana Confidant, is a professional shogi player whose strategic brilliance is overshadowed by her mother's attempts to exploit her celebrity. Her story explores the pressure of parental expectations and the courage required to forge one's own path, rather than living as an instrument of others' ambitions. Spending time with Hifumi teaches Joker advanced combat tactics, allowing party members to swap during battle and execute more sophisticated strategies. The strategic partnership between the Phantom Thief and the shogi player creates synergy between their respective rebellions against controlling forces. The One More system, that rewards attacking weaknesses with additional turns, creates a rhythm of exploitation and punishment that defines Persona 5's combat. When all enemies are knocked down, players can trigger an all-out attack, featuring stylized splash screens of each Phantom Thief delivering a finishing blow. These attacks deal massive damage and often end battles instantly against weaker opponents. The unique finishing screens for each character became instantly iconic, with Joker's "The Show's Over" pose adorning countless pieces of fan art and merchandise. Memento serves as the dungeon reflecting the collective unconscious of Tokyo's general population, a manifestation of everyone's suppressed desires and distorted thoughts, rather than a single individual's palace. Its design as an endless subway system references how public transportation serves as the lifeblood of Tokyo, connecting millions of people who never truly interact with each other. The deeper players descend, the more oppressive and prison-like Mementos becomes, eventually revealing the prison of regression, where the Holy Grail holds humanity's desire for control. The music that plays in Mementos changes as players descend through its layers, reflecting the shifting atmosphere from mundane reality to cosmic horror. Meguro wanted the music to evolve throughout exploration, creating a sense of descent both physical and psychological. Different layers feature different variations of the theme, building in intensity and incorporating stranger elements as the Phantom Thieves approach the source of humanity's collective desire to be ruled. By the time players reach the depths, the music has become almost unrecognizable from the relatively upbeat tracks of the upper floors. The romance system in Persona 5 allows Joker to develop romantic relationships with several female confidants, though the game treats this possibility with characteristic subtlety. Romance roots typically unlock at rank 9 of a confidant, when dialogue options allow players to confess feelings or maintain the relationship as friendship. Choosing romance changes subsequent interactions and unlocks special Valentine's Day and Christmas scenes that acknowledge the romantic relationship. The game doesn't force any particular romance, allowing players to remain friends with all potential partners or pursue their preferred connection. Among the romance options, some proved more popular with fans than others. Makoto Nijima consistently topped popularity polls in Japan, her combination of intelligence, initial coldness, and gradual warming resonating strongly with players. Futaba Sakura attracted fans who appreciated her quirky personality and the protective dynamic that developed from Joker's role in her recovery. Anne Takamaki's warmth and determination earned devoted supporters. Even adult confidants like Takemi, Kawakami, and Oya could be romanced, though the game acknowledges the problematic nature of student-teacher and adult-minor relationships through dialogue that treats these options with appropriate gravity. Players who pursued multiple romances simultaneously discovered the infamous Valentine's Day consequences. Attempting to date everyone resulted in a scene where Joker is confronted by his various girlfriends, who discover his infidelity and react with justified anger. Sojiro even appears to witness the aftermath, cementing the protagonist's reputation as a cad. This consequence system provided humorous punishment for players attempting to have it all, while acknowledging the emotional reality that maintaining multiple secret relationships hurts everyone involved. Easter eggs scattered throughout the game reward attentive players with references to other Atlas properties and gaming culture broadly. The game's television can display programs referencing previous Persona entries, including a quiz show clearly based on the Midnight Channel from Persona 4. Posters advertising a fictional movie called Like a Dragon reference the Yakuza series, another Sega property following the company's acquisition of Atlas. Sharp-eyed players can spot references to Shin Megami Tensei, the parent franchise from which Persona originally spun off as a sub-series. The crossword puzzles Joker can solve on the subway train include clues that reference game mechanics and plot elements. The solutions sometimes hint at upcoming story developments or call back to earlier events. Working these puzzles improves knowledge while providing brief entertainment during commute animations. The newspapers in LeBlanc similarly provide world-building through headlines that track the Phantom Thieves' public profile, offering glimpses of how ordinary citizens perceive the mysterious group stealing hearts throughout Tokyo. The arcade in Shibuya contains playable games that reference other genres and eras of gaming. The crane game challenges players to win prizes with clunky claw controls that deliberately evoke real-world crane game frustrations. The shooting game tests reflexes while providing gun proficiency bonuses. The racing game offers charm improvements for impressive performances. Each minigame serves mechanical purposes while building the sense of Tokyo as a place where teenagers actually live, not just a backdrop for supernatural adventures. The bathhouse scenes that provide charm bonuses also contain references to Japanese bathing culture and anime tropes about bathhouse episodes. Visiting on specific days when the bathhouse runs special water provides enhanced benefits, encouraging players to track weekly schedules alongside confidant availability and weather patterns. The mundane detail of a teenager visiting a local bathhouse grounds the fantastical elements in recognizable routine, making Joker's extraordinary life as a phantom thief more believable by contrasting it with ordinary self-care. The fishing spot in Ichigaya provides a relaxing minigame that yields valuable items while building proficiency through the mechanics of casting and reeling. The Guardian, a legendary fish that rumors claim inhabits the pond, becomes an optional challenge for completionist players, willing to invest significant time and resources. Successfully catching the Guardian requires top-tier equipment and considerable patience, making it a badge of dedication rather than a necessary accomplishment. The fishing mechanics themselves simulate the rhythm of real angling, with timing-based inputs that reward practice and attention. Persona 5 Royal, released in 2019 in Japan and 2020 in the West, added substantial new content, including 2 new confidants, an additional palace, and various quality-of-life improvements. The new character, Kasumi Yoshizawa, and her mentor, Takuto Maruki, expand the story into a 3rd semester that explores themes of grief, denial, and the ethics of removing suffering from human existence. Maruki's palace takes the form of a research facility promising paradise, representing the danger of utopian thinking that removes human agency in pursuit of happiness. Takuto Maruki represents something unprecedented in the Persona series, an antagonist whose motivations are genuinely sympathetic, and whose methods, while wrong, come from authentic compassion. As the school counselor assigned to Shujin Academy after Kamoshida's crimes, Maruki provides support to students traumatized by their teacher's abuse. His confidant storyline reveals his research into cognitive psychology and his dream of creating a world without suffering. Unlike previous villains driven by greed, pride, or control, Maruki simply wants to end pain, having experienced devastating loss that broke something fundamental in his understanding of acceptable reality. The 3rd semester only becomes accessible if players develop Maruki's confidant to rank 9 before November, creating a significant missable content gate that encourages engagement with the new story material during the base game. Once triggered, the semester extends the calendar into January and February, periods the original game skipped entirely. The altered reality Maruki creates appears idyllic at first, with characters who suffered throughout the story suddenly happy and whole. Morgana has become human. Akechi survives his canonical death. Futaba's mother lives. Everything the Phantom Thieves fought for seems to have been achieved without any struggle at all. But the paradise carries a terrible cost: agency. Maruki's alterations rewrite not just circumstances, but memories and personalities, creating versions of people who never chose their own happiness. The philosophical debate at the semester's heart asks whether happiness matters if it isn't earned, whether peace achieved through manipulation invalidates the peace itself. The Phantom Thieves must choose between accepting a painless existence crafted by another, or reclaiming painful reality and the freedom to define their own futures. The answer seems obvious in theory, but becomes agonizing when facing characters whose real lives contain genuine tragedy. Maruki's persona, Azathoth, evolves into Adam Cadman for the final confrontation, both names carrying significant philosophical weight. Azathoth in Lovecraftian mythology is the blind idiot god at the center of existence, creating and destroying without awareness or intention. Adam Cadman in Kabbalistic tradition represents primordial humanity, the original divine form from which all humans derive. The evolution symbolizes Maruki's transformation from someone blindly reshaping reality to someone who believes he has become the template for a new, better humanity that need never suffer as the old one did. The true ending of Royal requires not just defeating Maruki, but processing the moral complexity of doing so. By destroying his palace, the Phantom Thieves condemn people to return to suffering they temporarily escaped. Morgana becomes a cat again. Akechi dies, or rather, the version of him that survived was always Maruki's creation. The victory feels hollow in ways the original ending did not, tainted by awareness that an easier path existed, and was rejected not because it was wrong in its outcomes, but because it was wrong in its methods. The addition of the grappling hook fundamentally changed how players navigated palaces, allowing access to previously unreachable areas and creating new opportunities for ambush attacks. The verticality this tool enabled transformed exploration from primarily horizontal movement to three-dimensional navigation. High ledges that seemed like unreachable background details became accessible platforms hiding treasures and shortcuts. The grappling hook also provided new ambush opportunities, allowing players to descend on enemies from above for surprise attacks that started battles with significant advantages. Will seeds, glowing collectibles hidden throughout each palace, provided rewards for thorough exploration while giving players another reason to engage with the environmental design. Finding all 3 will seeds in a palace creates an accessory that can later be strengthened into powerful equipment. The seeds glow faintly and produce subtle audio cues, encouraging careful attention to surroundings rather than simply rushing toward objectives. Their inclusion rewarded players who approached palaces as spaces to be explored, rather than obstacles to be overcome as quickly as possible. The Thieves' Den served as a gallery space where players could view artwork, listen to music, and even arrange figures of characters in diorama poses, celebrating the game's extensive visual assets. Unlockable through gameplay accomplishments, the Thieves' Den provided something like an achievement gallery, where dedicated players could admire the aesthetic work that defined Persona 5's visual identity. The ability to pose character figures and create scenes extended the game's creative possibilities beyond narrative into a kind of directed photography, generating countless fan-created compositions shared across social media. The Jazz Club provided another quality of life improvement with significant mechanical implications. Spending an evening at this Kichijoji venue allowed party members to gain abilities outside the normal leveling system, including resistances to elements and powerful new skills. The club also served as a bonding location, improving relationships with whichever party member Joker invited. The jazz aesthetic reinforced the musical themes central to Persona 5's identity, while providing a relaxed contrast to the tension of palace infiltration and the demands of daily scheduling. Kichijoji itself represented a major content addition, an entirely new district of Tokyo to explore, with unique shops, activities, and the billiards and darts mini-games that provided both entertainment and team-building benefits. The temple offered meditation that improved maximum SP, the resource that powers Persona abilities. The second-hand clothing shop sold equipment with unique properties unavailable elsewhere. Each new venue provided mechanical benefits while expanding the sense of Tokyo as a living city beyond the base game's locations. Persona 5 Strikers, known as Persona 5 Scramble, the Phantom Strikers in Japan, took the Phantom Thieves into the action game genre through a collaboration with Omega Force, the developers behind the Dynasty Warriors series. Rather than turn-based combat, players directly controlled characters in real-time battles against hundreds of enemies simultaneously. Despite the dramatic gameplay shift, Strikers maintained the narrative quality and character development expected from the franchise, telling a summer road trip story set several months after the original game's ending. The road trip premise allowed Strikers to expand beyond Tokyo into other Japanese cities, each featuring its own jail, the Strikers' equivalent of a palace. Sendai, Sapporo, Okinawa, Osaka, and Kyoto became destinations on the Phantom Thieves' journey, with each location's jail reflecting the distorted desires of a new antagonist. Unlike palace rulers who represent corruption and malice, the jail monarchs and Strikers are victims themselves, people whose trauma was exploited by the true villain. This sympathetic approach to antagonists anticipated the direction Royal would take with Maruki. The gameplay required significant adjustments to Persona mechanics. Pressing a button to pause combat and select Persona abilities preserved the strategic element of exploiting weaknesses, while maintaining action game flow. Each Phantom Thief played distinctly, with Ryuji's brawling style feeling very different from Yusuke's precise swordplay, or Haru's axe-swinging power. Joker retained his wildcard ability to switch between multiple personas mid-combat, making him the most versatile character while allowing players to adapt to different enemy configurations on the fly. Sophia, the artificial intelligence who joins the team during Strikers, provided a new party member without disrupting the established group dynamic. Her journey to understand humanity and her purpose paralleled the Phantom Thieves' own questioning of justice and belonging. Zenkichi Hasegawa, the police investigator initially pursuing the group before joining their cause, represented the adult ally the original game lacked. His persona Wolf represents loyalty and pack mentality, fitting for a detective who eventually recognizes that true justice sometimes requires working outside the system. The dancing games represented another avenue for expanding Persona 5's universe. Persona 5 Dancing in Starlight brought rhythm gameplay focused on the soundtrack that had already captivated millions of players. Like the dancing games for Persona 3 and 4, it featured both returning tracks and new remixes, giving players another way to experience Meguro's compositions, while enjoying lighthearted interactions between characters outside the pressures of their Phantom Thief duties. These spin-offs continued the tradition of using alternate genres to explore different aspects of the Persona experience. The premise placing the Phantom Thieves in a dance competition within the Velvet Room allowed for character interactions impossible within the main game's narrative constraints. Social elements between dances revealed new facets of personalities while celebrating the relationships players had built. The game's social mode provided visual novel-style conversations that expanded characterization without the pressure of completing a challenging rhythm game to progress. Costumes from throughout Persona history offered fan service for longtime series supporters. Persona Q2, New Cinema Labyrinth brought the Persona 5 cast together with heroes from Persona 3 and Persona 4 in a crossover dungeon crawler for the Nintendo 3DS. The chibi art style compressed the detailed character designs into adorable, simplified forms, while maintaining recognizability. The cinema theming placed characters in movie world dungeons representing different genres, from superhero films to science fiction to dinosaur adventures. Cross-team interactions let fans see how characters from different entries would relate to each other, fulfilling years of speculation. Persona 5 Tactica took the tactical RPG approach, placing characters on grid-based battlefields with an emphasis on flanking and positional strategy. The chibi art style represented a significant departure from the main game's aesthetics, but the tactical gameplay offered a fresh perspective on the Phantom Thieves' combat capabilities. New character Irina and her revolutionary struggle against oppressive forces echoed the original game's themes, while providing new story content for fans who had already experienced everything the mainline entry offered. The tactical combat required different thinking than the main game's turn-based battles. Positioning characters to catch enemies in triangular crossfire executed devastating triple threat attacks. Cover systems provided defensive advantages that encouraged careful movement rather than aggressive rushing. Each character's unique abilities suited different tactical roles, with Morgana's mobility complementing Haru's area control, complementing Makoto's support capabilities. The strategy genre translation proved more successful than some fans expected. maintaining Persona identity while delivering satisfying tactical puzzles. Persona 5 The Phantom X launched as a mobile game in China during 2024, introducing entirely new characters in a story adjacent to the original Phantom Thieves timeline. The mobile format allowed for ongoing content updates and gacha-style character collection, adapting the franchise for the dominant gaming platform in many Asian markets. While not available worldwide, Phantom X demonstrated the continued commercial viability of the Persona 5 brand across different platforms and monetization models. The anime adaptations brought Persona 5 to audiences who might never play a 100-hour role-playing game. Persona 5 The Animation ran for 26 episodes, plus special episodes covering the royal content, compressing the massive story into a more accessible format. The adaptation necessarily streamlined many subplots and confidant stories, focusing on the main narrative while providing glimpses of the social simulation elements. Director Masashi Ishihama brought visual flair to action sequences, while maintaining the stylish aesthetic fans expected. The Daybreakers prologue episode served as both promotional material and standalone story, following the Phantom Thieves on a minor mission before the main anime's events. This approach allowed the anime to begin with action, rather than the slow build of Joker's arrival in Tokyo, hooking viewers with the team at full strength before rewinding to show how they came together. The special episodes covering Persona 5 Royal's third semester allowed anime viewers to experience that content without purchasing and playing the expanded game. The success of Persona 5 transformed the franchise from a beloved niche series into a genuine mainstream phenomenon. Sales figures tell the story clearly. The Persona 5 series has now surpassed 13 million copies worldwide, with Persona 5 Royal alone accounting for over 7.25 million of those sales. These numbers make Persona 5 and its variations the best-selling entry not just in the Persona series, but in the entire Megami Tensei franchise. The original game's first week in Japan saw combined PS3 and PS4 sales of over 337,000 units, the fastest start for any entry in series history at that point. The broader Persona franchise now exceeds 23.5 million total sales worldwide, with Persona 5 accounting for more than half of that figure. This explosion in popularity brought the series to platforms it had never reached before. Persona 5 Royal's 2022 release on Nintendo Switch, Xbox, and PC via Steam opened the Phantom Thieves story to entirely new audiences who had never owned PlayStation consoles. The simultaneous multi-platform launch represented a significant shift in Atlus's approach to distribution, acknowledging that limiting availability to single platforms meant limiting potential audience reach. The game's critical reception matched its commercial success. Review scores consistently landed in the 90s across major outlets, with particular praise directed toward the visual presentation, music, and character writing. The Persona 5 Royal soundtrack won Best Music at the Famitsu Dengeki Game Awards in 2019, cementing Meguro's compositions as among the most celebrated in gaming history. Lists of the greatest role-playing games frequently include Persona 5 among the all-time greats, recognizing how it pushed the genre forward in both presentation and narrative ambition. Award ceremonies showered the game with recognition. Multiple outlets named it their Game of the Year for 2017, while it consistently appeared in Best of the Decade retrospectives as the 2000s drew to a close. The combination of style, substance, and sheer scale created something that transcended the usual boundaries of Japanese role-playing games, reaching audiences who might never have considered the genre otherwise. The Phantom Thieves became genuine gaming icons, recognized even by people who had never played a Persona game. The cultural impact extended beyond gaming into broader pop culture consciousness. Joker's mask became recognizable iconography, appearing in contexts entirely divorced from Persona 5 itself. The "you'll never see it coming" catchphrase spread as an internet meme applicable to any surprising turn of events. Gaming journalists and content creators reference the game's style when discussing aesthetic achievements in the medium. The Phantom Thieves' red and black color scheme influenced subsequent game interfaces seeking to capture similar energy. Fashion designers drew inspiration from the game's character designs, with Joker's coat appearing in various forms at anime conventions and fashion shows alike. The blend of high fashion influences with practical Phantom Thief functionality created looks that felt simultaneously costume and couture. Cosplayers invested significant resources recreating the intricate details of each character's outfit, with some costumes requiring months of work to properly execute the flowing coattails and glowing masks. The influence on subsequent game design proved substantial. Multiple games released after Persona 5 featured dynamic menu systems, clearly inspired by its revolutionary interface design. The lesson that menus could be expressive rather than merely functional spread across the industry. Even games in entirely different genres began incorporating more personality into their UI elements, recognizing that every screen the player sees represents an opportunity for aesthetic expression. The streaming and content creation community embraced Persona 5, despite its unusual length posing challenges for Let's Play formats. Streamers dedicated dozens of broadcasts to complete playthroughs, building communities around shared experience of the narrative. The game's systems provided endless opportunities for strategic discussion and optimization, fueling theory-crafting content alongside pure entertainment. Clip compilations highlighting particularly stylish moments or emotional story beats introduced the game to viewers who might never play it themselves. Music reaction videos became their own content genre, with reactors unfamiliar with video game soundtracks discovering Persona 5's music and expressing genuine surprise at its quality. Last Surprise, in particular, generated countless reaction videos, its unexpected jazz sophistication contrasting sharply with assumptions about video game music. These reactions introduced the soundtrack to audiences who might never explore gaming media otherwise, demonstrating how quality transcends medium boundaries. The academic attention paid to Persona 5 reflected its thematic depth. Scholars analyzed its treatment of Japanese social issues, its philosophical engagement with questions of justice and authority, and its psychological frameworks drawn from Jung and beyond. Papers examined the game as cultural criticism, as mythological synthesis, and as interactive narrative achievement. The attention from academic circles suggested Persona 5 warranted serious consideration alongside other significant cultural works of its era. The game's treatment of sensitive topics generated both praise and criticism. Some lauded its willingness to address sexual harassment, corporate exploitation, and political corruption directly, rather than through sanitized metaphor. Others criticized certain choices, particularly the comedic treatment of moments involving unwanted romantic attention and the limited LGBT representation in a game otherwise focused on outsiders challenging societal norms. These discussions demonstrated that fans and critics alike took the game seriously enough to engage with its messages, rather than dismissing it as mere entertainment. Translations into additional languages expanded accessibility beyond English and Japanese releases. Players across Europe, Asia, and South America experienced the Phantom Thieves story in their native languages. Though some localization choices generated debate about the best way to adapt culturally specific content. The challenges of translating not just words but context, tone, and cultural reference highlighted the complexity of bringing any creative work to global audiences. Each language version represented significant investment in making Persona 5 accessible to new populations. The modding community on PC versions created additional content extending beyond the official release. Custom costumes, gameplay modifications, and quality-of-life improvements proliferated across modding sites after the Steam release. Some mods addressed criticism of the original, such as adding options that the base game lacked. Others created entirely new content, from additional personas to new music tracks to complete visual overhauls. This community creativity demonstrated ongoing engagement years after the game's initial release. The speedrunning community developed optimized routes through Persona 5's massive runtime, eventually completing the game in fractions of the intended duration. These speedruns required intimate knowledge of game systems, exploiting subtle mechanics in ways designers never anticipated. Watching speedrunners navigate a 100-hour game in under 20 hours provided a different form of entertainment than casual play, celebrating mastery and optimization rather than narrative immersion. The community's dedication to perfecting routes years after release demonstrated enduring engagement. Joker's inclusion in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate as the first fighter in the game's first Fighter's Pass represented a major milestone for the franchise's mainstream recognition. Announced at the Game Awards 2018, the reveal trailer sent shockwaves through the gaming community. Nintendo's celebration of gaming history through Smash Bros. Meant that Joker now stood alongside Mario, Link, and the most iconic characters in the medium. The Memento stage that accompanied him featured music from Persona 3, 4, and 5, while spirits representing other Phantom Thieves and characters provided additional content for fans to unlock. The Smash Bros. Inclusion brought Persona 5 to attention among Nintendo-focused players who might never have encountered the PlayStation exclusive title. Curiosity about the stylish newcomer led many to investigate his origin game, contributing to the eventual decision to bring Persona 5 Royal to Nintendo Switch. The cross-pollination between Nintendo and PlayStation audiences demonstrated how strategic crossover appearances could expand franchise awareness beyond traditional boundaries. The character's fighting style in Smash Bros. Captured Persona 5's essence within the platform fighter framework. Joker's ability to summon Arsene after taking enough damage reflected the Persona summoning system, providing comeback potential that rewarded skilled players who could survive to reach their powered-up state. The stylish victory poses, the menu aesthetics adapted for Smash's interface, and the faithful recreation of the all-out attack as a final smash all demonstrated careful attention to preserving Persona 5's identity within the crossover context. Director Masahiro Sakurai's dedication to faithfully representing each franchise in Smash Bros. Meant Persona 5 received treatment consistent with gaming's most beloved properties. The detailed documentation Sakurai shared about the development process revealed extensive research into Persona 5's mechanics, narrative, and aesthetic philosophy. This respectful approach reassured Persona fans that their beloved characters would be handled with appropriate care, while introducing the series to millions who experienced Joker first through Nintendo's platform. The theatrical quality of Persona 5's storytelling reflects Japanese entertainment traditions dating back centuries. The Phantom Thief archetype itself connects to kabuki theater traditions of charismatic outlaws who steal from the corrupt to help the common people. Goemon Ishikawa, the historical figure who inspired Yusuke's persona, became legendary through kabuki plays that dramatized his exploits. The all-out attack finishers specifically reference kabuki stage traditions, with their dramatic poses and stylized presentation, evoking the mie technique, where actors freeze in dramatic moments to emphasize emotional climaxes. The influence of Lupin III on Persona 5 extends far beyond the obvious Arsène-Lupin connection. Director Hashino specifically mentioned similarities between the game's early trailers and Lupin III's visual style, with both properties featuring stylish criminals operating in contemporary urban settings. The red and black color scheme, the emphasis on cool, composed heists, and even certain camera angles during palace infiltrations call back to the legendary anime franchise. Meguro's initial consideration of brass jazz for the soundtrack was directly inspired by Yuji Ono's iconic Lupin III compositions. The game's exploration of Japanese society touches on issues ranging from sexual harassment in schools, to corporate exploitation of workers, to political corruption at the highest levels of government. Each palace target represents a different failure of Japanese social institutions. Kamoshida embodies the abuse enabled by sports culture and the reluctance to challenge successful athletic programs. Madarame shows how the art world can enable exploitation under the guise of mentorship. Kaneshiro demonstrates how organized crime preys on vulnerable young people, while authorities look the other way. Okamura's Palace delivers pointed criticism of black company culture, the term Japanese workers use for corporations that exploit employees through excessive overtime, psychological manipulation, and disposability. His space station filled with robotic workers literally depicts humans as interchangeable parts in a machine designed solely to generate profit. The timing of his palace in the game coincides with when players have likely spent many late nights grinding through content, creating an uncomfortable parallel between the exploited workers and the player's own time investment. Shido represents the ultimate corruption, a politician willing to sacrifice everything, including his nation's well-being, for personal power. His vision of Japan as a sinking ship that only his leadership can save reflects the rhetoric of authoritarian movements throughout history. The game released during a period of increasing global concern about political manipulation and the rise of strongman leaders, giving Shido's palace an uncomfortable relevance that extends beyond Japanese politics specifically. The Confidant system evolved from Persona 3's social links, but with significant mechanical changes that made progression feel more meaningful. Each Confidant now provides specific gameplay benefits beyond simply improving Persona fusion bonuses. Progressing Ryuji's Confidant eventually allows instant kills against weaker shadows. Maxing Makoto's Confidant gives detailed enemy analysis. Completing Kawakami's Confidant lets Joker slack off during class without penalty. These tangible rewards encouraged players to invest in all available relationships, rather than focusing solely on romance options. The romance options in Persona 5 allow Joker to pursue relationships with numerous female confidants, continuing the dating sim elements that have defined the modern Persona trilogy. However, the game faced criticism for its handling of certain romantic scenarios, particularly involving adult characters in positions of authority over the teenage protagonist. Teacher Sadayo Kawakami and Dr. Tai Takemi both become romance options, despite the clear power imbalance these relationships would represent in reality. The game largely ignores these concerns, treating the romances as straightforward wish fulfillment without deeper examination. The option to date multiple characters simultaneously leads to what fans call the harem route, culminating in a Valentine's Day scene where all of Joker's spurned girlfriends confront him simultaneously. This comedic scene acknowledges the player's behavior without truly condemning it, treating romantic manipulation as fodder for humor rather than meaningful consequence. The scene became popular in fan communities for its over-the-top awkwardness, but it also highlighted how the game's treatment of relationships sometimes prioritized player fantasy over narrative coherence. The absence of same-sex romance options drew particular criticism, especially given scenes that appeared to mock gay characters. Two effeminate men who persistently hit on Ryuji appear as recurring gags, with their behavior portrayed as predatory and uncomfortable. These scenes felt particularly jarring in a game otherwise celebrated for its progressive themes of challenging oppressive systems and fighting for those society marginalizes. Atlus addressed some of these concerns in Royal by revising the scenes involving the two men, though same-sex romance remained unavailable. The daily life simulation aspects of Persona 5 require careful time management across the in-game calendar year. Each day offers limited opportunities to develop confidants, improve social stats, explore palaces, or work part-time jobs for money. The 5 social stats, knowledge, guts, proficiency, kindness, and charm, all require investment to unlock certain confidant progression paths and story options. A first-time player cannot possibly maximize everything, creating natural replay value as players return with better understanding of optimal time allocation. The recurring question, "What should we do?" that Morgana poses after each palace completion reflects the open structure that sets Persona apart from more linear role-playing games. Players genuinely choose how to spend their limited time, rather than simply following a predetermined path. The calendar creates urgency, as palace deadlines loom and confidant availability shifts based on story progression and player choices. This structure turns the entire game into a resource management puzzle, where the resources are ours in each day. Crossword puzzles, television quizzes, and classroom questions test players' real-world knowledge throughout the game. Correct answers provide social stat boosts, encouraging engagement with the educational content embedded throughout. Teachers ask about historical figures, scientific concepts, and grammatical rules, with the game providing just enough context for attentive players to deduce correct answers. The quiz show that appears on specific nights offers substantial rewards for answering correctly, turning trivia knowledge into tangible gameplay advantage. The batting cages and fishing spots provide relaxing diversions from the high-stakes heist narrative. These minigames offer their own rewards, while providing opportunities to raise social stats or bond with confidants in casual settings. The claw machine at the Akihabara arcade lets players collect Jack Frost plushies, among other prizes, complete with music that references the June's department store theme from Persona 4. These small touches reward longtime fans, while remaining accessible to newcomers encountering the series for the first time. Book reading provides another avenue for stat improvement, with various titles available for purchase at Shibuya's bookstore. Each book requires multiple reading sessions to complete, but provides significant stat gains upon finishing. The selection includes references to real literary works and in-universe fiction, with one title specifically based on Arsène Lupin, providing fitting reading material for the aspiring Phantom Thief. Movies at the theater also provide stat bonuses, with the available films rotating based on the current in-game date. The coffee and curry that Sojiro teaches Joker to prepare at LeBlanc become important resources for palace exploration. Properly brewed coffee restores SP, the resource that fuels Persona abilities, while curry provides similar benefits in meal form. The care put into these preparation scenes reflects Japanese appreciation for craft and process, showing the steps required to create something of quality, rather than simply presenting finished products. Sojiro's confidant progression is literally tied to teaching these skills, connecting character development to mechanical gameplay improvement. Persona 5's take on the collective unconscious draws from Carl Jung's psychological theories, while adapting them for interactive entertainment. Jung proposed that humanity shares a collective psyche, containing universal symbols and archetypes that transcend individual experience. This explains why shadows and personas take the forms of mythological figures and legendary beings, as these entities exist within humanity's shared imagination. The metaverse literally manifests this psychological space as navigable terrain, turning abstract concepts into dungeons to explore and enemies to fight. The major arcana of the tarot provide the framework for categorizing both personas and confidants. Each arcana represents specific qualities and life lessons, with confidant storylines often reflecting their assigned card's traditional meaning. The Fool represents new beginnings and unlimited potential, fitting for the wild card protagonist who can hold multiple personas. The Magician signifies taking action to manifest one's will, appropriate for Morgana as the guide who introduces Joker to his powers. The Lover's card traditionally represents relationships and choices, matching Anne's focus on connection and her struggle to define herself beyond others' perceptions. The Tower arcana, traditionally representing sudden upheaval and the destruction of false structures, connects appropriately to gunshop owner Munehisa Iwai, whose past catches up to him throughout his confidant story. Death, symbolizing transformation and endings that make way for new beginnings, links to back alley doctor Tai Takemi, as she works to clear her name after a patient's death ended her hospital career. Judgment appropriately belongs to prosecutor Saya Nijima, who must ultimately judge the protagonist's story and decide whether to believe his seemingly impossible claims. The investigation sequences where Sai interrogates Joker frame the entire game as an extended flashback. This narrative structure allows the story to begin in medias res, with a dramatic casino heist, before rewinding to show how Joker went from ordinary transfer student to Phantom Thief leader. The framing also creates dramatic irony, as players know the interrogation is occurring while experiencing events that will lead there. Certain choices during the interrogation sequence determine which ending players receive, with wrong answers potentially leading to bad endings where the conspiracy succeeds. The true ending requires players to resist the temptation to make a deal with the corrupt prosecutor investigating the Phantom Thieves. Selling out allies in exchange for lighter treatment might seem pragmatic, but the game punishes this choice with an ending that implies the protagonist will eventually be silenced permanently. Only by maintaining loyalty and trusting that the Phantom Thieves' plan will succeed can players reach the proper conclusion where Yaldabaoth is confronted and defeated. The game tests whether players have actually internalized its themes about standing against corruption, even when compliance would be easier. Yaldabaoth's name comes from Gnosticism, an early Christian sect that believed the material world was created by a flawed deity separate from the true supreme God. The Gnostic Yaldabaoth, also called the Demiurge, fashioned the physical universe but did so imperfectly, explaining the presence of evil and suffering in existence. Persona 5's Yaldabaoth similarly represents a flawed divine figure who believes humanity requires control and order rather than freedom. His defeat allows humanity to reject the comfortable prison of surrendered will in favor of uncertain but genuine choice. The Jungian foundations of the Persona series run deeper than surface references to shadows and masks. Carl Jung's analytical psychology proposed that the human psyche contains multiple layers, from the conscious ego that navigates daily life, to the personal unconscious, holding repressed memories and desires, to the collective unconscious, containing universal archetypes shared across all humanity. The metaverse manifests these theoretical constructs as physical spaces that can be explored, fought through, and ultimately changed. Jung's concept of the shadow describes the parts of ourselves we refuse to acknowledge, the traits and desires that don't fit our self-image and get pushed into darkness. In Persona games, confronting and accepting one's shadow enables the awakening of a persona, the opposite process from real-world shadow projection, where people deny their flaws by seeing them in others. The Phantom Thieves' targets project their shadows into palaces so elaborate they become separate cognitive dimensions, their denial of wrongdoing so complete that their shadows have become entirely separate beings. The mask symbolism pervading Persona 5 connects directly to Jung's original term. Persona in Latin means mask, the face actors wore in classical theater. Jung used the term to describe the social masks people wear to navigate different contexts. The professional self that differs from the family self, that differs from the self among friends. The Phantom Thieves' masks represent the personas they adopt to function in society. But removing the mask, the painful process of persona awakening, requires confronting the authentic self beneath social performance. The violent awakening sequences, where Phantom Thieves tear off their masks in sprays of blood, visualize the psychological pain of self-confrontation. Accepting the shadow isn't comfortable or easy. It requires acknowledging parts of yourself you've spent years denying. The blood that flows when masks are torn suggests both violence and birth, the destruction of false self-image enabling the creation of authentic identity. Each awakening represents psychological integration, the process Jung called individuation, where conscious and unconscious elements combine into a whole functioning self. Archetypes in Jungian psychology are universal patterns and images that recur across human cultures, inherited forms in the collective unconscious that shape how people perceive and respond to the world. The Tarot's major arcana provide a convenient symbolic system for representing these archetypes, which is why the Persona series has used tarot imagery since its earliest entries. Each arcana represents a fundamental human experience or aspect of psychological development, from the innocent potential of the Fool to the completion of the world. The wildcard ability possessed by Persona protagonists represents psychological flexibility, the capacity to embody different archetypes as situations demand. Most people identify primarily with one or two archetypal patterns, but the wild card can authentically connect with all of them. This is why building confidant relationships across all arcana matters mechanically and thematically. Each bond represents genuine understanding of a different way of being human, expanding the protagonist's psychological range until he can access any aspect of the collective unconscious. The cognitive world's responsiveness to belief reflects Jung's observation that psychological contents feel absolutely real to those experiencing them. A person gripped by anxiety experiences genuine threat even when objectively safe. Someone consumed by jealousy perceives infidelity in innocent interactions. The palace ruler's distorted cognitions have become so powerful they manifest physical spaces. But this differs only in degree from how everyone's psychological states shape their experienced reality. The metaverse literalizes what happens internally for everyone. Individuation, Jung's term for the process of psychological maturation, requires integrating aspects of the self that seem contradictory. The conscious mind must acknowledge the shadow. Masculine psyches must connect with their feminine aspects, the anima, while feminine psyches must contact their masculine aspects, the animus. Rational thought must make peace with irrational intuition. The Phantom Thieves' journey models this integration process, as characters who begin with limited self-understanding gradually develop more complete relationships with themselves and others. The collective nature of the Phantom Thieves' mission distinguishes them from previous Persona protagonists, who often worked with more intimate groups. The investigation team of Persona 4 numbered fewer members and operated in a small-town context. Seize in Persona 3 was a formally organized group with institutional backing. The Phantom Thieves represent a grassroots movement that grows to encompass public consciousness itself. Their ultimate power comes not from individual strength, but from collective belief, a perfect expression of how archetypes gain power through cultural participation. Sataneo, Joker's ultimate persona, represents the Gnostic interpretation of Satan as a liberating figure rather than pure evil. In this tradition, Satan provided humanity with knowledge that the demiurge sought to withhold, making him a symbol of enlightenment and rebellion against unjust authority. The persona's design incorporates elements of the 7 deadly sins, transforming vices into tools against the god of control. Sataneel's awakening requires the collective belief of the public, transforming from Arsène through the power of millions of people choosing hope over resignation. The emotional climax, where the Phantom Thief supporters reach out to believe in them, reflects the game's core message about the power of collective action. Throughout the story, the team struggles with whether they truly matter, whether their efforts to change hearts actually improve society or simply satisfy their own desire to feel important. The public's response to Yaldabaoth's control, their choice to believe in the Phantom Thieves rather than accepting defeat, validates everything the team has worked toward. Individual hearts change throughout the game, translate into collective will capable of challenging even gods. The New Game Plus option allows players to carry over social stats and certain items into a fresh playthrough, enabling completion of confidants and content missed the first time through. Sataneel himself can only be fused in subsequent playthroughs, requiring other late-game personas as fusion materials. The compendium preserves previously acquired personas for purchase, removing the need to recruit them again. These features acknowledge that fully experiencing Persona 5 requires significant time investment beyond what a single playthrough allows. Fan reception has sustained interest in Persona 5 for years beyond its initial release. Cosplay of the Phantom Thieves remains common at anime conventions worldwide, with Joker's distinctive mask and coat providing an immediately recognizable silhouette. Fan artists produce endless variations on character designs and scenario explorations. The music has achieved independent popularity, with tracks like Last Surprise and Rivers in the Desert appearing in reaction videos and meme compilations created by people who have never played the game itself. The phrase, "you never see it coming," referencing lyrics from Last Surprise, became an internet meme separate from its original context. The song plays during ambush attacks when players successfully surprise shadows, and its confident opening lines about catching enemies unaware resonated beyond the gaming community. Similarly, Beneath the Mask, the melancholic evening theme, developed an audience among lo-fi music enthusiasts who discovered it through streaming recommendations rather than gameplay experience. Merchandise featuring Phantom Thief iconography continues to sell well years after the game's release. The mask logo, Morgana's face, and character-specific symbols appear on clothing, accessories, home goods, and collectibles. Collaboration cafes in Japan have served Persona 5-themed food and drinks, with dishes named after characters and decorated to match the game's aesthetic. These limited-time events become pilgrimage destinations for devoted fans, combining fandom with culinary tourism in distinctly Japanese fashion. Persona 5: The Animation adapted the game's story into anime format across 26 episodes, plus several specials. While providing an accessible way to experience the narrative without the 100-plus-hour gameplay commitment, the adaptation necessarily condensed and simplified many story elements. The pacing required to cover a massive role-playing game in anime format meant certain character moments and confidant storylines received less attention than they deserved. However, the animation also offered new perspective on story beats and allowed animators to expand certain action sequences beyond what the game engine could display. The stage play adaptations brought the Phantom Thieves to life through live performance, with actors in elaborate costumes recreating key scenes from the game. These theatrical productions represent another aspect of how Persona 5 has permeated Japanese entertainment culture beyond its original medium. The kabuki influences present in the game's design translate naturally to stage performance, completing a circle that connects contemporary video games to centuries-old theatrical traditions. Looking toward the future, the success of Persona 5 has established enormous expectations for Persona 6. Atlus has teased future developments, with comments about the 30th anniversary of the Persona series in 2026, suggesting announcements may be forthcoming. Director Hashino has moved on to lead Studio Zero, the Atlus subdivision responsible for Metaphor ReFantazio, leaving the next mainline Persona entry to his successors at P Studio. Whether the new team can match or exceed the heights achieved by Persona 5 remains to be seen, but the foundation has been laid for the franchise to continue evolving. The transition between Persona generations has historically brought significant changes while maintaining core identity. Persona 3 established the modern template that Persona 4 refined and Persona 5 perfected. Each entry found its own themes, aesthetic identity, and cast of characters, while building on mechanical foundations laid by predecessors. Persona 6 will likely follow this pattern, creating something distinctly new while remaining recognizably Persona. The challenge lies in innovating without abandoning what made the series special. Speculation about Persona 6's setting, themes, and characters has fueled discussion across fan communities for years. Will the next entry maintain the Japanese high school setting that has defined the modern series, or explore different contexts like college, international settings, or entirely different age demographics? Will the social simulation elements expand, contract, or transform? What color will define the visual identity, following blue, yellow, and red? These questions animate ongoing conversation about a game that doesn't officially exist yet. The Persona 3 Reload release in early 2024 demonstrated Atlus's commitment to preserving and enhancing the series' legacy while developing new content. The full remake brought the game that established the modern Persona template to contemporary hardware, with extensive quality-of-life improvements and visual updates. The positive reception suggested appetite exists for similar treatment of Persona 4, with fans hoping the revival treatment would bring the Inaba murders to new audiences with modernized presentation. The relationship between mainline entries and spin-offs continues evolving. Strikers, Tactica, and the dancing games proved that Persona 5's characters could support stories across multiple genres and formats. Future spin-offs will likely continue exploring different gameplay styles, while maintaining the character focus that defines the franchise. The mobile market, largely untapped outside Asia, represents potential expansion territory, as Phantom X suggested the brand can adapt to different monetization models and gameplay formats. Sega's broader transmedia strategy positions Persona alongside Sonic as one of the company's most valuable intellectual properties. While no major film or television adaptations beyond the existing anime have been announced, the franchise's narrative depth and visual distinctiveness make it an attractive candidate for adaptation. The success of other video game adaptations in recent years has demonstrated that gaming properties can thrive in other media when treated with appropriate care and respect for source material. The question of how long the Phantom Thieves themselves will remain Persona 5's focus deserves consideration. Main characters from previous entries rarely appear in subsequent games, except through crossover titles and references. Persona 6 will almost certainly feature an entirely new cast, meaning the current extensive Persona 5 content represents the complete story of Joker and his friends. Future appearances will likely be nostalgic callbacks rather than new adventures, making each spin-off potentially among the last opportunities to experience these characters in new stories. What makes Persona 5 special extends beyond any individual component to how everything works together in harmony. The music enhances the visuals, which reinforce the themes, which drive the character development, which provides stakes for the combat, which rewards progression through systems that loop back to music, visuals, and themes. Every element has been crafted with intention and polish, but more importantly, every element has been integrated to support the whole. This holistic design philosophy separates Persona 5 from games where excellent components exist in isolation. Persona 3 Reload's 2024 release demonstrated Atlus's commitment to preserving and updating the series' legacy while working toward new entries. The remake brought modern quality of life improvements and updated visuals to the game that established the modern Persona formula, introducing new audiences to Seas and Tartarus while satisfying longtime fans' desire to revisit that world with current generation polish. Similar treatment for Persona 4 seems likely, with rumors of Persona 4 Revival suggesting another beloved entry may receive the full remake experience. The transmedia strategy Sega has outlined positions Persona alongside Sonic as one of the company's most valuable intellectual properties, suitable for expansion into films, animation, merchandise, and beyond. While no specific adaptation announcements have been made for Persona 5 beyond what already exists, the door remains open for future projects that could introduce the Phantom Thieves to entirely new audiences through different media. The franchise's proven ability to captivate millions suggests any well-executed adaptation would find eager audiences. What makes Persona 5 truly special extends beyond its individual excellent components to how they work together in harmony. The music enhances the visuals, which reinforce the themes, which drive the character development, which provides stakes for the combat, which rewards progression through systems that loop back to music, visuals, and themes. Every element has been crafted with intention and polish, but more importantly, every element has been integrated to support the whole. This holistic design philosophy separates Persona 5 from games where excellent components exist in isolation. The game asks players to consider uncomfortable questions about society, authority, and complicity, while providing the power fantasy of becoming the change they want to see. It acknowledges that teenagers often see injustice more clearly than adults, who have learned to accept corruption as normal. It suggests that the first step toward changing the world is refusing to accept that change is impossible. These themes resonate particularly strongly with younger players, navigating their own complex relationships with schools, families, and societies that often seem designed to control rather than nurture. The Phantom Thieves represent what happens when young people stop waiting for permission to act. They make mistakes, struggle with their own flaws and insecurities, and face consequences both deserved and undeserved. But they also achieve things that seemed impossible, changing hearts that seemed unchangeable, and ultimately standing against forces that would have crushed them individually. Their victory comes not from being chosen ones with special destinies, but from choosing to fight when fighting seemed futile. The emotional journey from falsely accused transfer student to leader of a movement that saves humanity provides satisfying progression while maintaining the series' commitment to grounded character development. Joker earns his triumphs through relationships built over time, skills developed through practice, and wisdom gained from failure. The wildcard ability might seem like a cheat code for power, but it only matters because Joker builds the connections necessary to access its full potential. Power without friendship would mean nothing against Yaldabaoth's control. Consider the hearts that changed throughout this journey. Teachers who abused their positions were forced to confront their cruelty. Artists who stole credit for others' work acknowledged their fraud. Corporate leaders who viewed employees as expendable recognized the humanity they had denied. Politicians who sacrificed their nation for personal glory admitted their selfishness. Each change rippled outward, touching lives beyond the initial targets, demonstrating how individual transformation can cascade into collective improvement. The Phantom Thieves' story reminds us that the world doesn't have to be the way it is. Systems that seem permanent and unchangeable exist only because people accept them. The moment enough hearts shift, even the most entrenched corruption becomes vulnerable. This isn't naive optimism, but recognition that human societies are human creations, subject to human revision when enough humans demand change. The metaverse may be fiction, but the distorted desires it manifests exist in reality, and challenging them doesn't require supernatural powers. Persona 5 invites players into a world where style and substance combine, where being cool and being compassionate complement rather than contradict each other. The Phantom Thieves look amazing stealing hearts, because looking amazing is part of making people believe change is possible. The music pulses with confidence, because confidence is necessary for challenging systems that want you to feel powerless. Every element serves the message that rebellion can be joyful, that fighting injustice can be beautiful, and that standing against corruption can be the coolest thing a person ever does. The legacy of Joker and the Phantom Thieves continues to grow with each new player who experiences their story, each fan who creates art inspired by their adventure, each person who hears Last Surprise and wonders what game could possibly deserve such an incredible soundtrack. Whatever comes next for the Persona franchise, Persona 5 has secured its place as a landmark achievement that defined a generation of role-playing games, while captivating millions with its singular vision of stylish rebellion against a conformist world. Sweet dreams, and remember, the show's never truly over for those who carry the spirit of the Phantom Thieves in their hearts. If you enjoyed this journey through Persona 5 Facts and Secrets, please like this video and subscribe to the channel for more gaming content to sleep or study to. Hit that notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thank you for listening, and may your palace always have a safe room nearby.